Welcome into another edition of NBA Sound System Canada. 2 in 1 week. We got to make up for lost time. It is Friday, June 27th, the day after the 2-day NBA draft. And me and my guy, Kyle Irving, I am Gil McGregor, or Gil McGregor. I just said in full government. Gil McGregor here with Kyle Irving here to react from everything that happened in the 2-day NBA draft, as well as some other news, notable news concerning the Toronto Raptors that just crossed our desk today. Before we get into the NBA draft stuff, though, Ki, what's up, man? How you feeling after the 2-day NBA draft marathon?
I'm feeling a lot better this time around. I actually have to apologize to our listeners for one, the way that I sounded in the pod earlier this week, and two, it was just one of those things where when I listened to it back on Riverside here, I was like, man, I just started talking with no end game of where I was headed with things. My head was pounding. I was all congested. I was having trouble breathing. So, I tried to put on for the team and have a flu game. I don't think I exactly did it as well as Jordan did back in the day, but feeling a lot better. Excited to talk about the draft today.
You know what? You fought through it, though. We still got the dub. We fought through it. You're back. Also, the full episode is on YouTube, so you'll see Kyle blowing his nose intermittently on the show.
God.
But to know what you were fighting through, though. But the fans know. Yeah. Everybody knows. Everybody who listens, and we of course appreciate all of you who subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. We'll keep this in your feed. And we'll keep talking throughout the NBA offseason. That being said, I feel like we talked about the trades that have happened already. Of course, there's been 5 big ones already. Actually, first of all, the Kristaps Porzingis trade happened like an hour after you and I finished recording. So we haven't talked about all the trades, but the offseason is fully underway. So I guess before we talk about the draft real quick, you had a lot of thoughts about that Porzingis trade. It's been some time now. Have you calmed down a little bit? Or are you still like, man, this is crazy work?
It is crazy work. I mean, but it also is that was, so it was surprising to me, like I said on the pod earlier this week, that the Celtics were able to get anything of value for Drew Holiday because every team knew that they had to trade him to try and reach their goal of getting under the second apron and
right.
Under both aprons, I think is, kind of their end game altogether. So it was impressive they were able to get Anthony Simons out of that in a second round pick. But I would have thought that Kristaps Porzingis would have gone for more than just a salary dump. And Georges Niang is not the answer in Boston. I can tell you that much. I still have hopes that they reroute him instead of Sam Hauser. To get under that second apron. I mean, to get under the first apron, if that's, their end game and their game plan. But it does sound like Sam Hauser is drawing some legitimate interest, and they'll be able to get some, either an asset or future draft picks for him. So, I'm just going to trust what Brad Stevens has going on. There's no reason not to, but I do think that he finally got on that one.
Is this the most Boston trade ever? You got Terrence Mann involved, you got Georges Niang involved, and the Celtics involved. So and all legs of the trade, it's just Boston all over. I don't know, maybe there's been another one, but it might be the most Boston trade ever.
Yeah, I wish that the Celtics got Terrence Mann though instead of Georges Niang, because I mean, he can shoot the three, but other than that, I don't know how much he's really going to help contribute to winning basketball next year. But I digress.
Yeah. Anyway, that being said, just want to talk about that real quick. Want to let you get it off your chest, but we can get into the NBA draft now. No surprise in the top 2. We talked about it a little bit. Cooper Flag goes 1 to Dallas. Dylan Harper goes 2 to San Antonio. Then 3rd overall was VJ Edgecombe to the Philadelphia 76ers. Concanipple to Charlotte at 4, and we'll round up the top 5. Ace Bailey. That was the first big surprise of the night. Goes 5 to Utah. Apparently, he wanted to go between 6 and 8. And there's a lot been going on with that. That is a saga in itself. But we talk about, I guess, the whole lottery in itself, right? Going through 1 through 14. I was really impressed with what the Spurs did. They took Carter Bryant from Arizona, 14th overall. Pelicans also made 2 lottery selections. Took Jeremiah Fierce from Oklahoma. Took your guy, DQ, Derek Queen from Maryland. And I don't know if you've warmed up to that one yet either. A lot of people are dunking on the Pelicans for the methods to get that pick. And for those of you who don't know, they traded up 10 spots. But what they risked was an unprotected first-round pick next year, either the Pelicans pick or the Bucks pick. So it could be the first overall pick next year going to Atlanta. Atlanta makes out like bandits because he's the 23rd pick. Take Asa Newell. Before we get into all of that, takeaways from the lottery. What stands out? How are you feeling after looking at those first 14 picks?
I think the Spurs nailed the draft. When Carter Bryant fell in their lap at 14, that was, to me, I'm like, how does this keep happening to them? It just feels like, I think I mentioned it the other day on the pod, but, we sent something out from the Underdog account. The Spurs have had 5 top 5 picks in NBA history, and 4 of those guys won Rookie of the Year. It's just the history behind it is insane. 3 of the 4 so far with Dylan Harper being
right.
5th. It's just unbelievable. It just feels like things always find a way to fall, in their favor. And it's going to be interesting to see Dylan Harper alongside De'Aaron Fox, alongside Stephon Castle. But I also do think that Stephon Castle is so versatile and he can, kind of morph himself into so many different versions of players. We saw him play the one at UConn, and he played the one a little bit for the Spurs last year. He spent most of his time at the 2 or the 3, and I think that's probably more likely going to be what he ends up playing for them next year, with Dylan Harper being much more of an on-ball creator and scorer. But I think that fit will work. And by the way that you graded out how the Spurs did in the draft, I think you feel the same way. But I feel like the Spurs really knocked it out of the park with Dylan Harper and with and Carter Bryant. Those are 2 players who I think have high ceilings. They fit exactly the timeline they're looking for. They fit the type of player that fits around Victor Wembanyama. And I'm very excited to see what the Spurs look like next year.
Yeah, the big thing is, like I said last time, get number 1 the ball, and everything else will be fine. But I don't know if I talked about this earlier in the week or not, but it makes you think about, that video with Jalen Williams, J-Dub, at the draft. And they say, who do you compare your game to? And he says Shea. And it's like, man, why would the Thunder draft a guy who plays like Shea when they already have Shea? It's like, no, you get the best player and you figure it out. And then the Thunder ended up drafting another guard in Cason Wallace. And they also have Lou Dort, who is a guard size. And they also brought in Alex Caruso. So it's a copycat league. And we can see that there is a way or a path for success when you have a lot of guys who maybe need the ball in their hands, especially if they are cerebral players like De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, and Dylan Harper. They're going to figure it out. And you get the best player available, and then you figure it out later. And also you bet on your development timeline. Victor Wembanyama's 21, Castle's 20, Dylan Harper's 19, about to turn 20, I think. And, the other young guys on that team too. Jeremy Sohan's another young guy on that team as well. So Carter Bryant in that core, it's going to be really exciting. I think Mitch Johnson is in a great spot. I think he has the ear of those players, and he can develop those guys. So far and away, the winner of that draft, I think. And I don't have the Mavericks aren't that far behind getting Cooper Flagg. They only made 1 pick, but he was the guy. I wrote that in my NBA draft grades. You were eager to talk about today. Jason Kidd at his introductory press conference says he's going to put the ball in Coop's hands early on, have him play a little one, make him uncomfortable. How do you see that playing out for him in his rookie season now in Dallas?
That's kind of what we talked about earlier this week too, right? It's like that's the exciting part about Cooper Flagg landing in a destination where they already have so many established, talented players around him. And with Kyrie Irving out until January at the earliest, Cooper Flagg is really going to have an opportunity to have the ball in his hands more often than he would have if Kyrie was healthy to start the season. And, why not play him at the 1 at Summer League? Like, what is the worst thing that can happen there? I honestly, personally, in my opinion, think that the biggest area of his game that needs to improve is his ball handling and decision making. Like, he's found ways to score as a cutter. Yes, his jump shot isn't knocked down the way that I think he would like it to be, or the way that he wants it to be when he hits kind of the peak of what he looks like in his NBA career. But it's reliable enough where the ball handling, like we saw a lot of turnovers in college of him, that spin move in the lane, like teams started to figure him out because he was right. They knew it was coming. And like, this is going to be an opportunity for him to have the ball in his hands, for him to, work on his game as a facilitator and kind of process the game at a faster level at the NBA level. So I'm really excited to see that, and that's kind of, again, just the benefit that he has going to a destination like Dallas, where they're going to be competing for a championship right away. And he's going to get to wear a lot of different hats depending on the matchups.
I think the cool thing for him and the big thing for him, I guess, and fortunate thing in this situation, right, is that their expectations don't really kick up until Kyrie's back on the floor. And a lot of times we see it with rookies. They start to really understand the NBA game and gain their footing February, March. And that is when they need Cooper Flagg to have it, not all put together. He's 18 years old, but have, be ready to contribute to a team with high expectations and high aspirations. By the way, Kyrie Irving extended 3 more years in Dallas, so he signed a new contract. He re-upped. He'll be there. He'll be a part of the future. No issues, no worries about that. So I think it's a great plan. We saw Jason Kidd mentioned it. He did it with Giannis, and that had a big hand in Giannis becoming the player who he is, because he was having some triple doubles at the time with turnovers, or having a lot of turnovers at the time when the ball was in his hand a lot. But he would not be the player that he is today if it were not for J. Kidd trusting him to have those opportunities when the leverage is lower, when the stakes are lower. So when they are higher, when it's time to do it in the playoffs, in the conference finals, in the finals, he's ready to do it. And again, this is a great start for Cooper Flagg. I think it's funny that Nico Harrison's like, this is the plan. You see the vision? You had a 1.8% chance, buddy. Like, if that was part of the plan, man, that is wild. Imagine any profession saying, yeah, my plan hinges on something that we have a 1.8% chance of happening. I guess you could say the same thing, that those are probably the same chances of winning a championship. But anyway, I digress. A couple other teams that stand out their draft class to me. I like that Utah, in addition to Ace Bailey, brought in Walter Clayton Jr. from Florida, a winner. It's been a knock on the Jazz. Don't really have any blue chip prospects. I think that Bailey and Clayton fit that bill. I like what the Hornets did. Got some safe picks. Con Knipple, Ryan Kalkbrenner, they used their second rounder to get. They also got Liam McNeely from UConn. Little questionable getting Sion James at 33. I wasn't too thrilled about that, but he could develop into that, defender type role. It's not because he went to school, but two Dukies in one draft is maybe a bit much. But another one, like I said, Phoenix, I am really happy, pleased with what they were able to do. We've talked about kind of where they are and the Kevin Durant situation, thought that was going to set them back, but to be able to address the need for a center and getting Kamal Malawach, falling to them at 10, but then also trading up to get Rasheer Fleming to start the second round, and then getting Kobe Brea, another shooting guard. But I think that they had an identity and an idea of what it is that they were trying to do in this draft, and I like that draft for them a lot, actually.
I actually want to go back to the Hornets. I want to ask you about the Conca-Nipple pick, because to me, like, Conca-Nipple, great player. I really liked what I saw from him at Duke this year, especially the time that Cooper Flag was out, and he showed that he was able to step up more as a scorer, as a playmaker, comfortable with the ball in his hands, more than just a catch and shoot knockdown shooter. But to me, like, I feel like his ceiling is that of a really, really, really high caliber role player, like someone who stars in their role.
Yeah.
And for a team like the Hornets, I agree that they need safe picks. And I fully think that he is someone that fits in very well, almost perfectly, with LaMelo, with Brandon Miller, with Miles Bridges. Like, I think that he fits in with the core. But there was part of me that's like, could they have traded back and gotten Conca-Nipple? Like, was there a team? Maybe they thought that there was another team that was ready to take him, before they could have traded back. But like, just at the number 4 pick, to me, to pick somebody that, in my opinion, has that of their ceiling being a star in your role type role player. And yes, you need those types of players to win championships. The Thunder just showed us that, the Celtics have showed us that last year, and the Nuggets showed us that the year before that. Like, yes, that I get that part of it, but I'm also like, at the number 4 overall pick, would it have been worth rolling the dice on a player like Ace Bailey? Would it have been worth rolling the dice on, someone else that you felt like maybe has a higher chance of hitting? I don't know. Like Trey Johnson, right? Like, I don't know. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, when you put it that way, I think Trey Johnson is the one that maybe they'll look back and question whether or not they should have made the play for him. Again, I think, like you said, the ceiling is maybe lower, but the floor is high. And I think that, and everything I've been seeing, not like I have super inside Hornet sources, but just being connected in the community, I've been seeing that the franchise in the front office is fed up with losing. That's been happening a lot. Health is a big part of why they've been losing a lot. And they just want to get guys who they know what they're going to get from. They're not rolling a dice at all, which at the same time, though, you can't win anything if you aren't afraid to risk anything. And that's kind of the balance of where they are right now. And even if the risk is trading back to get more draft capital down the line, maybe you take that risk if you still think he's going to get there. And if he's not going to be there, whether it's 6 or 7, there's still some good guys on the board at that point. So I agree with that completely. It kind of feels like, I guess, how safe do you want to get at 4? But I do think that he's going to come in right away. And like you said, as long as guys are healthy, playing alongside LaMelo Ball, playing alongside Brandon Miller. I saw some cool nickname potentially. Ball 24/7 since Knipple's wearing 7, and Brandon Miller wears 24. I saw Black Ops because Ball, Brandon, LaMelo, Khan. You know what I mean? So they got some nicknames at least. So we'll see how that plays out. But I also think that pairing that with, getting McNeely and Kalkbrenner and James, I think makes it a little more of a full class of safe guys, young guys who, if you decide to potentially blow things up, which I think that's on the table eventually, maybe even at the deadline, they might have a little bit of something to rebuild with. But yeah, I don't necessarily see him as a franchise cornerstone in that case as well.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't want to like make it seem like the Hornets never take risks, because like honestly, last year I thought they reached for Teodon Salon. Like that's I thought that was a pick where I'm like, I'm like, all right, like I see the upside swing. Like like if you were watching his tape from overseas, it's like, okay, yeah, he's not really a knockdown shooter. He's like super raw. He's long and athletic and all that, like everything that falls under that category. But it's like, there were probably better players available at 7. I think it was at 7 last year.
6, I think 6, yeah.
6, yeah, 6 when they took him last year. And I kind of respected the pick, because it's like, all right, well, like you're not really expecting to be super competitive this past season. So like, what's the risk in taking a guy like that? So, I mean, if they're, thinking of it in that way and they're like, all right, we want to go with a safer pick, then I get why they went Concanipple. And again, I'm not criticizing the fit. I was more so just like him at number 4. But then I also want to talk about, and I know we want to get into the Raptors too, and Colin Murray Boyles, but like I also want to talk about your thoughts on the Pelicans and trading up for Derek Queen, who, I'm extremely high on, but, sacrificing that unprotected 2026 pick. And like, are they going to be competitive enough to make that pick worth trading? Like, I want to know where you stand on that.
In the West, man, like I look, I like what they're doing, I guess, but it's like, it's one of those things where it's like they're starting to get all these pieces together and then they're going to sort everything out later. It's a new regime, new front office. Joe Dumars is there. Troy Weaver is there. They made that deal. We didn't even talk about that either. They made the trade. Did we talk about it? Yeah, we did. We didn't talk about it though, to get Jordan Poole and get Sadiq Bey. So they have interesting situation going on. They draft Fears, Tracy J. McCollum. We know DeJounte Murray is still rehabbing the Achilles. So it's like a lot of stuff happening. And I was talking to my friends. Obviously, all my friends are big Pelicans fans. And they're like, is Fears better than Jose right now? Is he going to play? Right. And like, it's like figuring that out and how that situation goes. What does Derek Queen look like in this offense? They have Yves Misi already. How does that work with the spacing that Zion needs? And Trey Murphy, I think, similar to how I had the conviction about Amin Thompson being a guy, I think Trey Murphy is a guy. And the league is starting to realize that like Trey Murphy might be, if he ends up staying there, could be the franchise guy, and maybe Zion can take a step back, and that puts less pressure on him, and they build around him. And is that the way you build around him? Getting a skilled big like Queen and getting a guy like Fears who has a great high ceiling. Another young member of this class, could have been in high school still, but he ended up going to OU a little bit early. So it's a kind of a TBD situation. It seems like a mess. Like, how well do you think the front office can sort it out? One of my friends who is like the staunchest fan, but also the most critical, says that basically these are moves of a team who is okay with a second round exit kind of being their ceiling. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't necessarily know if they think that final chips are what they have. That. There's nothing wrong with that. It's hard to win in the NBA. Right. But to your point, they're not a year away from that. Like, it's going to take some time. So, I want to flip it back to you because I know you said you weren't too thrilled about DQ's fit in New Orleans. Have you warmed up to it a little bit, or what do you think about that? Maybe he can be a second unit guy. How does he play with Zion? How does he play with Trey Murphy? I don't know.
Yeah, so that's the thing where I had to really sit down and write out what I thought the Pelicans depth chart looked like, because I obviously want what's best for DQ, and I wanted him to go to a situation where I thought that I think I've said it over and over again. I believe in his skill so much, in his shooting touch, in his passing ability, in defending when he wants to defend, which, I mean, obviously at times he was shouldering such a massive offensive load on at Maryland that it was tough to do it on both ends of the floor. But, I believe that he's going to be a good player no matter where he ends up. And I just didn't love the fit in New Orleans because him and Zion are kind of similar in the sense that they both like to have the ball in their hands as bigs. And I don't know if I haven't seen any quotes yet. I don't know if they've even had their press conference yet, but I'm very curious if their intention is to use DQ as is he going to be a stretch four on the wing? Do they want him to be a back to the basket kind of offensive hub? I'm curious to see the way they want to use him. I realized when I did out their depth chart very quickly that they have a lot of guards. There's a lot of guards, which I don't think I really realized that at
Jordan
first.
Hawkins yet.
Right, exactly. Yeah, Jordan Hawkins, and then you already mentioned Poole, and they drafted Jeremiah Fears, who I really, really like. I think he's awesome. I think he's one of the more NBA ready guys in this draft class. You already mentioned Jose Alvarado. He's their dirt dog. He's a guy that's going to up the energy. They like him a lot. Trey Murphy is technically a shooting guard. I mean, I know he can also play the three, but and then there's Herb Jones. There's talent on that roster. It's just, how far is that talent going to get them, and was it worth? I mean, clearly they like Derek Queen a lot if they were willing to trade up and move their 2026 unprotected. They like him a lot, and they knew that he wasn't going to get to where the pick they originally had. So, DQ's, or from a fan of DQ and wanting what's best for him, I was pumped to see that he went to a franchise that wanted him that much. I'm just, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. And I did respect what Shams had said. I think it was on the Pat McAfee show or something like that. He's like, you can't really grade that trade out as poor until you see what that draft pick turns into. Maybe the Pelicans turn into a middle of the pack team that is a 6 seed in the West or a 7 seed in the West. And that pick is at 14 next year or something like that, 13 next year. Then it's and I know the top of next year's draft class is really, really talented. I'm not too familiar with what it looks like in the middle to back end of the first round. So I don't hate them taking a swing. It was just kind of, I've warmed up to it. If you couldn't tell, I've warmed up to it a little bit.
A little bit.
It was just one of those things where like at first I'm like, all right, there's kind of a logjam in a lot of positions. I don't really know what direction this franchise is going in. I don't know if they know what direction that they're going in. And I'm curious to see how it plays out.
Yeah, biggest takeaway I'll have with that is that probably means that more trades are coming, and like you mentioned, they have talented guys, so they can get value, and maybe they get a first round pick back. Who knows? Something like that could happen as well. Maybe they're cooking something up, maybe they're not, but we'll see. I feel like we spent a lot of the first half talking about winners, so we'll talk about some losers after a quick break, and then we will get into everything that's going on with the Toronto Raptors, including an interesting draft class that they have. All right, those of you listening out there, when I said NBA draft losers, you probably thought about the franchise that hosts the draft every year. The Brooklyn Nets, everybody's scratching their head. They had 5 first-round picks, and it was a haul of picks that they had from everything that's happened over the years. Made their first, this is crazy. I don't even know if you know. Do you know the last top 10 pick the Nets had? The last time they had a top 10 pick?
Was it like, I don't even know, like E.G. and Leon?
Derek Favors was the last first-round pick in 2009. Derek
No
Favors was their
way,
last
man.
first-round pick. The last top 10, last top 10 pick they made. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they traded them all to Boston and Houston and everywhere else. But I guess that makes sense. That is crazy, though. No, I did not know that.
He was their last top 10 pick. So your first top 10 pick since 2009, Yegor Dimon from BYU. I don't dislike him, but I don't like him at 8. Then they go 19, Noah Traore, another guard who needs a ball in his hands. All right, sure. Drake Powell at 22, I had him ranked lower than that on my big board. Like what he could potentially do defensively, but these are your first 3 picks in the first round. I'm a little confused. Then they go Ben Saraf at 26, getting D'Angelo Russell comparisons. Another guard that they have, another guy who needs the ball in his hands. And then they close out the round with Danny Wolf, a guy that you like, but also a big part of what he does well requires him having the ball in his hands. And I just left that scratching my head that they used their 5 first-round picks to do that. We're hearing reports that other front offices are laughing at them. They're being laughed at in the media. Maybe my guy, and shout out to my guy, Sean Marks, maybe he gets the last laugh. But until then, what are they doing? What are they doing, Kyle? Help me figure it out.
All right, I got a comparison for you. But before I do that, we got to mention that they are also the first team in NBA history to use 5 first-round picks in the same draft. And at the start of the draft, I think it was Bobby Marks that reported they had made the first pick with Igor Demon, and he had said the Nets intend to use all 5 first-rounders. And I immediately was like, there's just no way that they're using 5 first-round picks. And slowly but surely, they're on the clock. And there's no trade to be made, and they draft another guard. And then they're on the clock, no trade to be made, they draft another guard. And the comparison that I'm going to give you is it was after the season that like the memes started to go crazy of the Los Angeles Angels. And it was like Mike Trout is 2 for 4 with a home run. Shohei Ohtani is 2 for 4 with a home run. And the Angels lose 6-5 because they had absolutely no pitching.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know what happened, but in the next draft, I think the Angels had like 20-something draft picks. They drafted 20 pitchers. They literally drafted a pitcher with every single pick that they made, just praying that if we throw enough darts at this class of pitchers, that we will find one that is at least halfway decent. And that's a comparison I'm going to give you for what the Brooklyn Nets did in this draft. They are looking for a playmaker. They are looking for someone that they can run their offense through. They are looking for somebody reliable with the ball in their hands consistently. And I think that they took the Los Angeles Angels approach of if we just draft a bunch of guards that need the ball in there. Well, Danny Wolf's not a guard. He's a 7-footer. But if we just draft a bunch of guys that need the ball in their hands and can play make, maybe we'll land on one that is at least halfway decent and can be our guy. I don't know if there's a single one of these picks that you or I or anybody would look at and be like, wow, they really nailed that pick. And I like Demon. I really do. I think that he has the potential to be solid. He can't really shoot, but I like his playmaking ability. I like, big playmaking guards like most.
That's what's in these
NBA
days.
teams.
That's what's
right,
in.
That is what's in these days. I do like it. But to your point, like when you're looking at the 5 first-round picks that they made, I'm not sure there's anyone that I look at, and maybe Danny Wolf at the value that they got him at, but I'm not sure there's any one pick that I'm like, wow, they really nailed that one.
Yeah, I think it's the collection of it. And I had to laugh too when you said the 20 pitchers thing. It brought me back 5 years ago when the Panthers went defensive tackle first round, defensive end second round, safety third round, cornerback fourth round, safety fifth, D tackle sixth, and
Yep.
cornerback seventh. So I can relate. This
Respect.
guy, he's like, you know what?
Yeah.
Like, we need defense. We're gonna get all seven
Yep.
rounds. We're gonna. So yeah, same situation with that. It makes me kind of wonder. First of all, get a couple. I mean, it was Saraf and Traore, two guys who played overseas. A lot of international roots with all these guys. Though Dimon from Russia and Danny Wolf has played for Israel, represented them overseas, or international competition. But I don't know, like is Saraf and Traore coming over? Are they ready right away? Like, especially thinking you're adding 5 guys to a roster that's kind of in place. I know that there's going to be a lot of movement there. I know Nick Claxton's probably on his way out. Is Cam Thomas still going to be there? Cam Johnson? What's the situation? What's the deal there? So yeah, it does kind of feel like a very much like a to be continued also. But again, like, maybe one of those guys in a vacuum, it's like, okay, I can see it. But like, you would think that if anything, kind of what we said about the Hornets, they'd maybe take one safe pick. And then, you also look into the draft order and who they might have been able to get instead of the guys they selected, thinking about who was available. And it seemed like they were really thrilled about Demon at 8, that the War Room reacted accordingly. Of course, they're always going to do that. But, Jordy Fernandez, and you said big guards are in. We saw Dylan Harper, Yakachonis, Kobe Sanders, even second round. So a lot of big guards. I think the league is trending towards that. We'll see more of it. We'll see how it plays out. But again, it's just a lot of head scratchers as far as that goes. But like you said, leaned into an identity, leaned into a type. And I'm saying that to say we can just transfer straight into what we said and what we texted back and forth. The Raptors have a type. They're going to stick with their type, and they will always stick with their type. Using the 9th overall pick, at one point I had mocked him there, but then I kind of eventually strayed away from it. Colin Murray Boyles out of University of South Carolina, and we could probably pull up a 2024 sound system like over a year ago, and you were talking about Colin Murray Boyles. He was one of your favorite guys in last year's draft class, but you thought he could do himself a favor by staying in college for another year. He did that. He only made 9 threes in his 2 years at South Carolina, so don't expect him to be a shooter, but rangy, defender, versatile defender, can be a secondary playmaker, can be an offensive hub. But that being said, as exciting as those things are, how much room is there for him to do that with the Raptors? Also, they use their second-round pick to draft Elijah Martin. They lock up defenders. So back-to-back years, you get Jamal Shed and Elijah Martin. Good luck to guards trying to bring ball up the court. But first, Colin Murray Boyles.
Colin Murray Boyles, well, if he had hit more than 9 threes across 2 years in college, the Raptors wouldn't have taken him because there were too many 3-pointers. That you need to be a 6'7" forward with long arms that can't shoot in order to be drafted by the Raptors. That's the criteria. I mean, you should know that by now. No, I'm just messing around, but I do like Colin Murray Boyles a lot. I like his potential and his versatility, the things that he can do defensively. I wish that he showed a little bit more offensive growth because, like you said, I had him before he decided to go back to school. I had him, I think it was like top 20 on my big board last year. I really liked the potential that he had. But I wish that he showed a little bit more progression on the offensive end this past year at South Carolina. That was also just not a very good team and a very good conference. Yeah. So, he was getting a lot of attention, probably more attention than he would have expected coming back for his second year. But in terms of the way that he fits with the Raptors, like we'll see what this Raptors roster looks like on opening night. Like, are they really going to go into opening night with RJ and with Quickly and with BI and with Scotty and with, we obviously feel very confident they're going into opening night with Scotty, but like BI. But beyond that, like who knows who else is still going to be there. And they do have plenty of guys like, Grady Dick started to take a little bit of a leap last year in terms of his shot creation and things like that. So, they have guys that can fill in the gaps offensively, which is good for Colin Murray Boyles because I feel like that'll really allow him to tap into what he does best, which is defend multiple positions, rebound, high motor, high energy, crash the glass, all things like that. So I like that pick in the way that he'll be able to star in his role right away. And I really like the Elijah Martin pick. Like that was a player who, I thought any team that ended up with him in the second round was going to end up with a gem. I mean, he's someone that, made a major impact at FAU, transferred to Florida, made a major impact at Florida. He was awesome for them in the NCAA tournament, extremely physical defender. He is kind of like a lot like Jamal Shed. I actually would say that he was probably a little bit more advanced than Jamal Shed was offensively in terms of like when they were coming out of college and how they project in the NBA. So I think Raptors fans should be just as high on Elijah Martin in the second round as they are in Colin Murray Boyles in the first round. But like you said, they have a type. They wanted hard-nosed defense. They got hard-nosed defense. I like both those picks. And, obviously it's going to be a new regime that's taken over, and we're going to talk about that too. But, if Masai Ujiri's parting gift was another solid draft class, I think he did a good job with that.
Yeah, I kind of echo what I said about San Antonio, right? It doesn't make sense until it does. You know what I mean? And like you get these guys, and Jonathan Mobo is another guy who fits that
Yep.
mold. And people didn't really scratch their heads at that pick, but his guys recording triple doubles last year as a rookie, and he showed great growth. And I think people don't really talk about it enough because the Raptors didn't have that much success as a whole, but I think they mentioned it during the broadcast. Finished the season 21-22 in their last 43 games, I believe. You got Perk saying that they could finish in the top 6 in the Eastern Conference. Maybe a little far-fetched, but it is the root of a beef, the root of a beef between him and Bill Simmons, which I did not have on my NBA draft bingo card. But just to think about just, kind of where the franchise is right now, to add Brandon Ingram to the mix of what they've been doing. And again, like, who knows who's going to still be there. They do have shooting. You talked about Grady Dick. You got Jacoby Walter as well. And Ochai Agbaji showed some leaps as well. So there are a lot of guys on the offensive end. I mean, even other guys like Jamison Battle stepped up in moments in time for them as well. So the Raptors are in an interesting spot. Be curious to see what things look like for them at Summer League. And again, I think there's something to be said about teams who go with continuity, that you get a lesser version of your star player, and when the second unit comes in, you can keep playing the same way. And I think that's kind of interesting when you think about, like, now you kind of have like the evolution meme with Scotty and CMB and Mobo, right? Like, that's kind of the thing where you do that now. And and if you have, and that's the other part, right? With Quick and RJ and Grady Dick aren't necessarily known for their defensive capabilities. So now you have some really good point of attack defenders in Shed, in Martin, which once he figures it out, no surprise, he played football in high school. If you see him, you'll recognize this guy. He's an NBA player with an NFL player's physique. But to be able to defend like that, and then obviously having the lengthy guys, and still have Pirtle on the back end, like, this is a very talented roster in a wide open Eastern Conference. I don't think it's far fetched to say that regardless of what they do or not, and they're going to probably do something, they will be in that play-in tournament contention. And I kind of feel like that's the goal and the next tangible step to get back to being a perennial playoff contender.
I do want to ask and kind of put you on the spot a little bit. Like, if you were the decision maker in that situation, do you think that you would have gone Malawach?
Yeah, that was what I thought, and that's like, NBA Africa and Masai Ujiri ties aside, I feel like it gives you the flexibility to allow him to kind of train up to be the successor to Jakob Poeltl. No pressure right away. And if Malawach is still 18 years old. If it's at the end of this year, if it's at the beginning of next year, whatever it is, you have a little leverage right there, and you can find something, because there are a lot of people out there that want Jakob Poeltl on their team. Okay, how bad do you want him? Now you can get something else, and we can answer that question as well. And now we have our center moving forward who fits that timeline. But, I think that I'm high on Malawach. It seems like the court of public opinion is torn on him. A lot of people are, critical of his hands, critical of his defensive rebounding. I think a big part of it is just he played with a lot of guys who were aggressive on the glass, and maybe he'll be better about that. He just, I think for me, I saw him play in person. I said this before, I'll say it again. 7'2", 250. He just takes up so much space, and he's still learning the game, but his instincts, a lot of times he was like, oh, wait, I can make a play here. And for teams, a guy that takes up that much space defensively, it's like, man, how do I even figure out how to do this? Now, obviously, there's 3 seconds in the lane in the NBA, and there wasn't one in college, but still, I think that the fact that he's still processing and learning and picking up the game makes him a very intriguing prospect moving forward. But that's what the Suns did too, right? I mean, I think I read it was intentional, but they traded for unintentional, but they traded for Mark Williams, and they get Malawach. I didn't think he was going to fall to him at 10, so he can kind of learn under Mark Williams now. So I think he's going to pan out and do well. But again, people were saying that the reaction and response to the CMB pick is similar to the Pascal pick 9 years ago. And he gets to be a part of the new bench mob, and then eventually maybe become the guy down the line when they're trying to play for a championship here down the line.
Yeah, the only reason why I would say that Malawach would have been my preferred pick for the Raptors in that situation if I was making the decision is strictly for what you said with Jakob Poeltl. It's like, if this team's goal is to compete for a play-in tournament spot this season, I think they could do that with or without Jakob Poeltl. And there are a lot of teams that could use Jakob Poeltl, and I think would pay a decent amount in terms of assets and picks
absolutely
to get him on their roster. And the Raptors would feel a little bit more flexible about moving off from him if they had a certified center waiting in the wing to kind of step into that role. And now that they don't have that, every single time they get an offer for Pirtle, it's going to be like, okay, well, who's going to play the 5? Like, are we really going to like play Mobo with the 5 all season long? Like, are we, so that's my only holdup of where they went with CMB. But I got, I have no, like you said at the top of the show, it's like when you're a team like that, you don't draft for fit, you draft for best player available. And if they felt like Colin Murray-Boyles is the best player available or fits their system best, I have no problem with that pick. It just would have been for like a long-term play with Pirtle as a potential trade chip. Why I feel like Malawach could have been an equally as good pick for Toronto.
Yeah. And the biggest takeaway, again, like you said, looking at the roster construction right now is they have the opportunity or the luxury, maybe I don't call it a luxury, but they have the ability to consolidate some of their talent to get a bigger piece. And that's the biggest thing that I think will happen down the line. But that's a great transition to say that when that happens, it's not going to be Masai Ujiri doing it. Bobby Webster now is going to be calling all the shots. Masai Ujiri, as we learned earlier today, no longer. He is out. That's president of the Raptors. And hold on, I gotta, as we talk about Masai, man, it's only right.
Oh, there you go.
The architect of the 2019 champs, man. We gotta show some love and respect and credit where it's due. Took over, I believe, in 2013 for the Raptors, and the franchise was down. And he leaves champion, a lot of deep runs, a lot of number 1 seeds and things like that in the Eastern Conference. What can be said about his legacy as the Raptors general manager, president, and everything he leaves behind over these past, I guess, 12 seasons?
Yeah, champion. Just the way that he developed players and prospects, the way that the Raptors the way that the Raptors started to become respected as a player development program, and the amount of guys that you look at that 2019 roster, like I feel like in the moment, so many people were like so quick to be like, well, yeah, if KD didn't get hurt and like they, yada, 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 they got the Warriors at their worst, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, even 6 years now, it's been 6 years since they won that championship. You look back at that roster, those fingerprints are all over the league still. Like, obviously Kawhi is still doing it. Yeah, right. Obviously Kawhi's still doing it. Like, Kyle Lowry, like his legacy speaks for itself. Like, but like, then you look at Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol, you look at Norman Powell, you look at what Pascal Siakam has turned into, you look at what Fred VanVleet's turned into. Like, there are a lot of talented players on that roster. That was a deep, deep, deep team. And that was not built because Masai was signing guys in free agency and because he was making obviously he made the Kawhi trade, but not because he was making and the Marc Gasol trade, but like making all these genius trades to like build this deep roster is basically the point I'm trying to make. Like, that was player development. That was undrafted guys. That was a diamond in the rough in Pascal. That's what makes that team so impressive. And I think that will be his lasting impact on the organization, is just the way that he turned the Raptors into like a very respectable team, a very sought after destination for draft prospects, undrafted players. Like, they turned into a little bit in the same way that like I feel like a lot of people feel with the Miami Heat. Like, they get an undrafted guy and everyone kind of raises an eyebrow and is like, man, did somebody miss out on someone they should have drafted? That might be a guy. Like, the Raptors were that for a while. And I do still think that they have some of that kind of like moxie to them. So, shout out to Masai Ujiri. Obviously did an incredible job during the time that he was there. I'm very curious. You were the one that said to me, like, maybe he's moving on to something bigger than basketball. And if he's not moving on to something bigger than basketball, there is going to be a lot of NBA front offices that were upset that they made hirings and changes before they knew that Masai was on his way out the door.
Yeah, I got to think about, I'll start back to when he took over in 2013. Weeks into the job, he is trying to do whatever it takes to move up in the draft, to draft this Greek kid named Giannis Antetokounmpo. Obviously didn't get him, but I think that speaks to his eye and from day one, what he's been trying to do with this franchise. I think back to the not safe for work, not safe for a family podcast speech that he gave before the Nets playoff series, and obviously got caught in the moment a little bit. But, there was the other one where he had that speech about like, man, why not us? Why not Toronto? Like, you and I don't comment too much about the state of professional sports in Canada because ultimately we've only been doing this for 7.5, 8 years, and we can't speak on what's going on with the Jays or the Leafs or the Oilers and all that stuff. But over the past 12 years, none of them have had the success, the Raptors have a championship to show for it. And thinking about just the mentality that he had, and you know, a lot of what we've known, and we talked to our guy Carlin Gay about this a lot, how that fan base, a lot of times, understandably, you know, for the first 17 years, it was a lot of woe is me. You know, Tracy left, Vince left, Chris Bosh left, and it's like nobody necessarily wants to be here. And then they make this swing. You know, you have an icon, and you bring in, you know, Kyle Lowry, and you know, you have him become the greatest Raptor of all time, and you make this swing for Kawhi Leonard. You talked about it, like the savvy trade to use a second round pick on Norman Powell, which, by the way, don't sleep on the second round picks that you see. But Norman Powell becomes a guy who is an icon and revered in Canada. And like all these deals, all these trades, taking Scotty Barnes fourth when everybody thought it was going to be Jalen Suggs. Obviously, Jalen Suggs has panned out, but Scotty Barnes proved to be the right guy. Even going with Nick Nurse when he was a relative unknown as the head coach to replace the coach of the year, and then winning a championship.
Right.
The Kawhi trade had a big hand in that, but like none of us thought that that was going to be what they did and how it went. So to think about the legacy that goes beyond basketball, I think about Giants of Africa. I think about everything that he's done with this Raptors franchise and all the stuff that we've seen up close and from a distance with him and this franchise. He's left his mark on this team. And I really am glad you mentioned the 2019 roster. People said they had no business of winning, but I was thinking about it. When Pascal was going off in game 6 of the finals, I was like, yo, this dude was like maybe the third option on that championship team. He grew to be the second option of that team. And the crazy graphic I think I still see, like he and Kawhi are like first or second all time in combined points in a playoff run. Like, dude was nice. And this is a guy who, when he was drafted in 2016, the book was like, oh yeah, high energy, motor big. Like he'll be maybe a reach at 26 or 27, whatever it was. Couple all NBA nods later, couple All-Star nods later, Eastern Conference Finals MVP later. You know, what can you say?
Man, he was like potentially Tyrese Halliburton tearing his Achilles away from being Finals MVP this year.
Right.
Like obviously that's not with the Raptors, but like everything that Pascal will do for the rest of his career will have the Raptors tied to it. And then like in terms of where they go moving forward, like I'd be pretty shocked if Bobby Webster doesn't stay in the position to just run the entire franchise. Like you know, he's obviously a brilliant mind, and I think he's somebody that they trust. And, you know, again, like there's probably Canadian minds that can speak more in depth on other options that they could look at to run the franchise. But I feel like he's someone that they trust, someone that they really like, someone who has proven that he is capable of doing the job. And I think they're in good hands moving forward. But what Masai's next step is like what really, really intrigues me, because it would also be pretty cool to see him go to a different franchise and try and, you know, turn things around. So, you know, I mean, we'll see. Obviously, at this point, pretty much all the jobs are filled besides the Knicks head coaching vacancy.
He's going to coach the Knicks.
He's going to coach the Knicks. Yeah, breaking news. But like, you know, all the front office positions and everything like that. Like, you know, I know the Nuggets had an opening. Like, there were other teams that had opening. The Hawks had an opening. You know, I don't think it'll be this season, but I do think that anytime that a franchise parts ways with who their key decision maker is, Masai Ujiri is going to be the first name on that list to fill that role.
Absolutely, and rightly so. And if it happens 6 months from now or a year from now, whatever it is, we'll be able to react to it and talk about it here on NBA Sound System Canada. So as always, we appreciate each and every one of you who tune in to the podcast, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube at NBA Sound System Canada. And make sure to follow us on Instagram. NBA Sound System Canada is the handle as well. It's only beginning. The offseason, free agency starts next week. I'm sure we will react to whatever happens, probably some more trades up the sleeve. We also know that Cooper Flagg is opening his summer league against Bronny James and the Lakers. It is like the WWE. It's going to be...
ESPN has no shame. No shame.
None. Zero at all. Like, that like, if you thought, that's got to be up there. Like Lonzo Ball's debut is probably going to be the most bananas summer league debut ever, and like it's hard to touch that. Zion's is up there too,
for sure.
This is gonna be in that area.
That is, I mean, like I saw someone just stating plain facts, and you and I, we don't have to we are both Bronny guys. Like we don't have to defend ourselves. I think everybody that's ever listened to this pod knows that. But like just stating plain facts, like the headliner for ESPN's first day of Summer League is the number 2 versus number 3 pick, and then the number 1 overall pick versus 46 from last year. Like, I mean, 55, not 46. 55, sorry, 55, not 46. No shame. No shame.
None.
No comment, no words.
And you know what? I'll be tuned in. So that's all.
Oh, I will be locked in. I will be locked in. I'll be watching the pregame. I'll be watching the pregame show. Like that's how locked in I'll be.
I'm all the way locked in. And of course, after
Yeah.
that happens as well, we will be here to react to that as well. So keep it locked in with us here on NBA Sound System Canada. For Kyle Irving, my name is Gil McGregor. We will catch you back here next week.